So the antibiotics that they put me on in the hospital, I remember hearing the ER doctor and the infectious disease doctor arguing because the ER doctor wanted me on a bunch of more medication to go home with. And infectious disease doctor was like, if you do that, you're going to kill her. And so he ended up.
That's always good to hear.
I know.
Yeah.
He,
All right, guys. Thanks for joining. Welcome to another exciting episode. Second podcast with the No Borders Homesteaders. Number 2,
Duh.
Duh.
Here's where we teach Tracy the French. Duh.
Duh. It's important to have that like little chicken, whatever you call it in English. Duh.
Duh.
Yeah. All right. So you got me from Rem's Family Farm, Remy, and that would be according to you. Okay, to my left, that would be my left.
Yeah, Tracy is that way.
Tracy.
Yeah.
And we have Annie.
Hi.
And around there we have Angie.
Hello.
And you can go ahead and present yourself. You didn't do it last week, so you can go and tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Me?
Yes.
I'm Darren from Thorhaven Farm.
Short and sweet.
He has Highlander cows and dad jokes.
Yeah, to do the kind of brief 30-second, we're a 13-acre homestead north of Quebec City. We've been going for probably about 6 years now, trying to build up food for us, trying to be self-sufficient, self-reliant. We grow or raise our own meat for a year. We probably grow enough veggies for about 6 months. We have our Highland cows, so that provides us our red meat for a year. We usually harvest 2 pigs a year, 50 plus chickens, sometimes rabbits, depending on the season, whether we have them or not. We've got bees, so they always provide us honey. Sometimes, well, this past year we didn't have bees, but we're getting them again this year. So yeah, we got egg-laying chickens. We got a whole bunch of animals here, and we try and slim the animals down for the winter, but lots in the summer.
The bees you're getting, is it from a swarm, like a swarming hive, or you're buying like a in a colony?
So we've purchased. There's a guy a little bit north of Montreal, and we've gotten our beehives, our bee swarms, our bee nucleus from them, and they always provide awesome bees. We go pick them up usually in the spring, bring them up here, get them started, get them going. We have successfully had them through the winter a couple times here in Quebec. However, Quebec weather where we are is kind of hard on bees. 6 months of winter, it gets a little brutal. The temperature fluctuations are really hard as well. Lots of moisture, +5 to +10 degrees, down to -30. So there's lots of things that don't make it great for honeybees to be able to survive our season.
This is going to be a hard season on the bees because it's been warm then cold and warm then cold. So instead of having that off warm day where they can do their cleaning run, where they go out and poop, they'll actually go out and start looking for pollen and stuff. And then as soon as the sun starts getting lower in the sky, it'll get cold and they'll freeze to death.
Mm-hmm. The worst for us is those warm days are usually very wet.
Yeah.
So instead of being a bright sunny day and it warms up where they can go out and do stuff, usually when we have those warm days now, it's usually wet and moist and stuff, and
muddy.
It's not good for the beehives or the bees.
All right, so tonight we'll be touching 2 different subjects. We will talk about the injuries on homestead, injuries, illness, and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll talk about protecting your homestead, but there's a lot more to protecting your homestead than just protection from potential intruders. And we'll talk about that later. So the first question that I might ask for all of you is, what were your injuries, either a long time ago or recently, that caused you pain, of course, but maybe more of an issue on the homestead where you can do the job you had to do properly?
Okay. You want to just start with Angie? She's the
She's
She
a
has a
good
few
girl.
with them.
I was gonna say, just before we did our live, I have a family chat going on, and my one of my daughters was like, "You don't need your mom to chase you with the wooden spoon. You just would trip and hurt your ankle. You get injured so much." The most significant one for me is it will be 2 years ago this coming July. I was splitting wood and I got my hand caught in the log splitter. And thankfully, I didn't break anything, but I did have to deal with quite a bit of swelling. Lots of hospital visits. I actually just contacted the surgeon again today. I haven't seen her in like a year and a bit, but it's still causing. I mean, you can't really see much, but it's this part of my hand and my knuckle. It's been cracking and popping, and when I type, it's not doing well. So it's affected me, especially back then. The swelling was crazy. I couldn't do much. Gardening was a chore, and I didn't even do much. That was one of the reasons why we didn't have a big garden that year, because we were trying to set it up, but I was injured and couldn't finish some of our gardening chores. And just everyday life things that you do. Thankfully, it's not my writing hand, but that was the most significant for me. My husband, Mike, he just about 8 months before we moved onto our property, he had major shoulder surgery, and that has held him up quite a bit, even to this day. So we don't move as fast anymore. But yeah, I mean, but that was probably the most significant one.
Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Patrick.
Patrick's here.
Hey.
Snuck in.
I could go ahead.
Yep, go ahead, Andy.
Probably going to be the question I'll be able to answer tonight. So I don't have any major injuries. I did, it's not even related to homestead. It's like daily life. Once my daughter closed my back door on my head, and I had a severe, well, not severe, but like somewhat good concussion. And I was out of commission for about at least 48 hours to 72 hours, but like nothing gets done. So that means the chickens doesn't get supervised until my husband gets back home from work, or the kids can, like during the week, I think it was like on a Thursday or Friday it happened. So I had to tell everyone else to do my chores. Thankfully, it was in the summer, so I was able to have a little bit more help from my husband and my kids. And like a similar situation, I squished my finger on the door, in the door frame. And these two fingers were out of commission for about 5-6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And that changed my entire gardening spring. Like it happened right where I had to plant beets, cabbage, everything. So I had to wait for my kids because it was my good hand. I had to wait for my kids to help me dig a hole, and everything was done with the left hand, and like I'm not very good. So again, everything had to be delayed. Everything had to be put on ice. I couldn't weed. I couldn't hold anything. So that means raking, picking up stuff, kneading bread, cooking, baking, emptying the dishwasher. Everything was taking longer every single time. And like stupid things, like I fell down the stairs and then like my back is out of commission for at least like a couple of days. But you kind of learn every time you fall. One, you're not getting younger.
What do you mean?
I don't know. My body didn't get the message, so my brain stays young. but my bones age. I don't know, they just didn't get the message. So every time like an injury, or even though if it's small or big, the recuperating part takes longer. And since it's a homestead that we have, like we keep pushing, like we need to do this, this needs to get done. So you start with one injury, and then you might create, like start with a finger, end up with a back problem, because like you,
Just
you
the
need to get
posture.
things done, because
You
no
start
one,
compensating too.
yes, you're compensating. So it's nothing serious, the injuries I had, but it did cause chaos in the planning. So if it happens during the spring, everything gets bumped a couple of weeks. If it happens in the summer, like you really need to get better fast, because the seasons are coming and everything's pouring on you at the same time. So
I forgot.
injury is not fun on a regular basis, but on a homestead,
It delays everything.
it delays everything, and sometimes you get screwed.
I completely forgot back then too. Like we had goats, and I think we still had chickens. So Mike had to take care of all of that stuff. And like I could go, but the goats, as awesome as they were, the goats would come up and they would kind of headbutt you. And so if they caught me off guard, there was a couple times when they actually didn't re-injure my hand, but they bumped into it and I felt it. But everything, like even the other day, well, it was a couple weeks ago, Mike was going to walk up a ladder, and even though I warned him, there's like the rubber nubs on the end of the ladder, and I was like, Mike, those look a little off. He goes, it's all right. And so he puts the ladder up, he walks up like 4 or 5 steps, and then the whole thing comes crashing down. His ankle swelled up. He was out of commission for a few days, but it's definitely what Annie said. Your mind stays young. You think you can do it all. And he realizes with each injury, that you can't. And our bodies just don't want to do anything as much as we used to, even though our mind is like, go, 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 go. But that can create more injuries too. So
For sure.
Yeah, the quickest you try to go seems like it's an injury plot in the making.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what happened to me is I got one of my toe. It's basically was an open fracture. And what happened is a wire, maybe a 1/8 of an inch gauge wire, got caught in the lawnmower.
Oh,
And it got the wire got into my toe. So imagine, the big toe. It went like a hook.
oh,
And so
I'm in pain just thinking of it.
I was gonna say, we can show our faces right now, whoever's controlling the web or the
yeah.
I feel it like everywhere.
I was cording wood.
I have a picture of it that he sent me. I'm thinking we might ought to save that for Patreon, though.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Because
Yeah.
it gave me the willies, man. It's like, those things with the arrows where you put it's like one of the girls' hair things, and it's got the arrows. It looks like he's got one of those on, except it's a piece of wire through his toe.
Yeah.
So the question for that is, what type of footwear were you wearing? Was it like regular footwear that they suggest for cutting the lawnmower? Or is it what you're wearing, flip-flops, or like what?
So I was cording wood. So I wore, I was wearing regular shoes, Snickers.
Okay.
So I was cutting wood in between 2 loads of wood. I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna mow the lawn there because it's gonna be fresh for the wood and stuff.
Right.
So I did that 2 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. And then I was like, oops. Oh. So I removed my Snickers. But before I did that, the wire was about this long. So I cut it off, removed the shoe. I was so mad. That I couldn't do it myself. I looked at it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to remove this. I was thinking about tetanus.
Tetanus, the tetanus shot.
That's right. So I was like, there's no way, there's no way. Like, even though I cut my toe, I would need to go somewhere and do something. So those shoes obviously weren't good enough, and steel toe boot would have prevent that.
It's funny because they talk about every time you're cutting grass, you want to wear shoes, whereas shoes when you're cutting grass aren't going to do it. They're about the same as flip flops.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Well, same
for
thing with
me,
pants. You need
I
to wear
found out to cut
pants.
grass in bare feet because
Me too.
whether it's flip flops or running shoes or bare feet, none of those three is going to make a difference for any kind of injury that's going to come off that blade. Even steel toe, it's going to be iffy whether that actually does protect you or not.
Could have been 2 inches higher. Steel toe boot wouldn't have done anything.
Right.
I'm very cautious when I do stuff, when I try to prep new projects and stuff, but I'm not overly cautious. Like, I don't create trouble where there's any.
Right.
Sometimes I'm going to make this and that to be secure, and then that end up messing you up more than likely.
Mm-hmm.
And by all means, you have to be careful. Like, put that ladder correctly with the rubber boots. And it is true that when you compensate, it creates more trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Because when that happened, the day after, I was changing my whole solar array on the roof and on the side of the house. So it wasn't bad as per a fracture, like it was an open fracture, but really it was so clean. It went in so quick that when it happened, I called Kay. She was at the grocery 2 minutes away, and I was like, "Hey, Kay, what are you up to?" She was like, "Well, I'm at the grocery." It's like, "Okay, when you come back, we're gonna need to go to the hospital." Like, she's like, "What's going on?" "Oh, something happened, but nothing wrong."
Nothing serious.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Be home.
It's funny when someone says that. Nothing to worry about,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's the butt that gets your attention.
Yeah.
It's always the butt, that's for
the
sure.
butt. Like, are you sure?
Another, when you guys were speaking about protective wear, it's not protective wear, but one thing that the hospital told me was I was very lucky I wasn't wearing my wedding rings or rings in general.
Rings are huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad I wasn't, because if I haven't already, I have worse pictures that I can send Tracy that we can show in the after.
The first picture is like right after the incident.
Yeah, it's my hand probably triple the size. My whole hand. Yeah. And the swelling went like all through my entire hand, and it puffed right up. And the hospital even said to me, it's going to probably go all black. It didn't. It did bruise, and it was nasty, but I was very thankful I wasn't wearing a ring.
Yeah.
It would have jammed pretty good.
Normally I don't think about that stuff. Normally, I'll wear a ring, but it was bothering me that day. And I had started getting a rash around it, so I took it off. And
you had
like
a guardian angel with you that day.
Yeah.
It's either the ring is going to squish, or the ring is going to remove extra flesh, extra skin, extra.
Juicy.
Well, within an hour.
Within
an hour of, like, from the time it happened to the time I got to the hospital, it was probably almost double, not quite, because it still had some swelling to do. And my ring would have been stuck on, and they said they would have had to cut it off. That was one of their first questions to me was, are you wearing a ring? And I was like, no, thank God.
I kind of like rethinking like gardening with my ring now.
Anything. I heard of a mechanic that had his finger melted because he touched the battery poles, and he had his finger with a ratchet,
So I guess I have to find a tattoo artist to tattoo a wedding band on my finger.
No
wedding band. They have the
silicone
wedding bands. I stopped wearing a wedding band because every time I would go to the grocery store with Wendy and I was wearing a wedding band, she would be behind me in line because she had the money and I was bagging and stuff. The lady at the checkout would stop would start flirting with me. When I stopped wearing my wedding ring, they stopped flirting with me.
It's true.
It
Wedding
is
ring
crazy how that
Tracy,
A lot
Never
of-
happened to me with or without. Fuck.
I have to go. So if I can, I'll come back after my course. If I can't, well, then I'll catch you on the next one.
All
Bye.
right. See you later.
So, Darren, you want to be next?
Yeah, I've had a few injuries, some that have affected me. In the past, I used to kayak and dragon boat. That has affected my shoulders. I have had both shoulders injected. This one is a little worse than the other, but that has kind of slowed me down a little bit on the homestead. The worst is, I think, when you're dealing with stuff like pigs, cows, that sort of thing, when you need to grab onto something and hold it, you really feel that jarring in your shoulder. So it's one of those things where my shoulders are not what they used to be. If I don't know how I could change that, but that's one of those things. And I used to swim competition as well, so I don't know if that rotation of my shoulders, doing the swimming, the kayaking, the dragging boat, were all playing an effect on that. But just trying to deal with large animals when they pull, it really affects it. I've had other ones where I stepped wrong getting off the tractor, rolled my ankle. It does affect me now and then, but not too bad. My knees are pretty screwed up, even from only being 3.5 years in the reserves, doing the marching with a rucksack and that sort of stuff. I'm pretty positive that's what screwed my knees up the way they are. And then the one thing that I just had happen this fall was stabbing myself in the shin. That let's see if I can show it here.
Hold on,
Right there. Yeah. So that one there was, you talk about injuries on the homestead with knives, with chainsaws, with tractors, with other stuff. That one really hit home on me for being able to look after yourself and deal with injuries on the homestead. I was dressing the cow, taking the skin off, and I was working around the hoof. And my knife was not as sharp as it should have been. I should have kept it a little sharper. And I was pulling and pulling, trying to split the skin at the bottom of the hoof. And it wasn't going, and I pulled extra hard. And because I was kneeling down, I was kneeling down close to the ground, and I pulled it, and it went right into my shin through the pants.
Real good art stab.
It was about an inch and a half deep, based on the, if I stuck the blade through my pants, the blade curves, right? So you can kind of tell how deep it's gone by how much of the pant it has cut.
So was it in the muscle or the bone or?
Right into the front of the muscle.
Oh.
So,
that's good.
With that, it started bleeding immediately. My pants, you could start seeing the red come through the pants. It was something where I was like, oh dear, this is a little bit serious. And I contacted Bridget. For those who don't know, Bridget's my wife, obviously. So I thought she was in the town very close to us, which is maybe 15 minutes away. But not thinking she was actually in a further town. So she was about 45 minutes away. So I texted her, said, hey, babe, I might have to go to the hospital to get some stitches and stuff. She's like, okay, third period's just finishing up for the hockey game. I'll be home, shortly.
Stitches.
I'm like, all right, she'll be here in like 10, 15 minutes. And she wasn't. And what I felt was it wasn't medical shock, it was the mental shock. So mental shock versus physical trauma shock is different. However, mental shock can still throw you for a loop. Your adrenaline gets going, you get the jitters, you start going white, that sort of thing. It's different from the actual medical shock, which can lead to death. So you have to be very careful in that situation. So the blood started coming out. I walked into the house because I needed to look after this. Pulled my boot off, pulled my sock off, and my sock was totally red with blood. Like it was a sock I was wearing. It was red. There was blood starting to fall onto the floor from it. And I realized, the first thing I need to do is get it clean because I was just dressing a cow with a knife. So I have no idea if I cleaned the cow good enough to make sure that that area around the hoof and the skin was clean. And that knife basically went from the hoof into my shin. So the first thing I did, make sure it's clean. Second thing I did was make sure the bleeding is stopped. For any major cut wound, you always want to make sure the bleeding stopped. We could go into detail about medical supplies and making sure the bleeding stopped, probably later or another episode on that. But realizing my wife was more than 15 minutes away, I needed to do self-aid on that. So I actually took honey from our honeybees because everyone had always told me honey is antibacterial. It's good for that kind of stuff. So I basically jammed a whole ton of honey into the wound because the bleeding had stopped by that point. Jammed the honey into the wound, put a dressing over it, and realized I need to get back to the work because the cow is out there. I need to get that cow finished and into the cool room because there is no one coming to save me. There's no one coming to help me. There's no one else but me that has to finish getting that cow dressed, quartered, and into the cold room. So it was like,
were you thinking about your leg still, or your injury at that point, or you just focused on the cow?
I was kind of focused on my injury to a certain point. I was at the point where I was like, I should be going to the hospital to make sure it is cleaned out properly. You don't want, in an injury like that, you don't want to get, I want to say sepsis.
Yeah.
Something like where you get an infection and that infection infects your bloodstream, and that can kill you too.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the thought in my head. And then the second thought was the cow, because if the cow stays out there, I could possibly lose my meat for the entire year.
Yeah.
So there was those two things that play in my mind where I had to make sure I cleaned that out properly, got it dressed properly, and then get back to work on the cow. Because I knew if I went to the hospital too, which I was thinking I should have, then my second thought was, no, I don't need to go to the hospital because they're going to be 6, 7, 8 hours before I get seen, and I'm not going to be able to get the cow done. So
the cow was a priority at some point.
The cow is definitely a priority versus going to the hospital. For me, as long as the wound is cleaned and dressed properly, that took priority over going to the hospital and getting stitches, because the cow took priority over how my wound looks afterwards.
Yeah.
When so how easy, just you were touching base on, this didn't happen when we were in the country. This happened a couple years prior when we were still in the city, but we made a trip to Florida. And you were talking about like infection and getting it cleaned and everything. When I went to Florida, I shaved my legs and went into a body of water and ended up coming back to Canada, staying in the hospital for 5 days. Those are some nasty pictures I'll send you as well, Tracy.
I think you sent me those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My leg, I ended up getting severe cellulitis. They actually thought I had flesh-eating disease at first. They treated me as if I did. And I was hospitalized for 5 days. The swelling in my leg, anytime my leg went down, it would literally triple in size and turn purple. But it was just a really bad case of cellulitis, and all because I shaved my leg and went into either, it's a spring, I don't remember the town, but the spring was called Ponce de Leon or Fort Myers Beach. Those
Fort
were the only
Myers.
two.
I know Fort Myers.
Yep. And so it was one of those two, and I ended up being in the hospital for 5 days. I wish, not that I wish that it happened when I was on the homestead, but it's a perfect example of how things can just take a turn. So that happened. You think, okay, you got an injury, you'll deal with that. Once that's healed, you're going to move on. And no, so the antibiotics that they put me on in the hospital, I remember hearing the ER doctor and the infectious disease doctor arguing because the ER doctor wanted me on a bunch of more medication to go home with. And infectious disease doctor was like, if you do that, you're going to kill her. And so he ended up,
That's always good to hear.
I know.
Yeah.
And he was in the next room and I could hear them arguing. And so he lowered my medication. I went home. And then I was taking a drink of water and I couldn't swallow. And so the antibiotics caused me to get thrush of not the throat, the esophagus. And so I wasn't able to eat. I wasn't able to drink, nothing. So they gave me a spray that helped with that. But then my immune system was so stripped, and I tried every probiotic to keep up with it because I was on heavy antibiotics. That led to me getting, within a 3-month period, well, 6 months by all of it, I had the stomach flu, a sinus infection, a cold,
Ouch.
and pneumonia. On top of healing from that and my stomach, it took me 9 months to heal from shaving my legs to go to a beach.
Microlesion is a real thing. Obviously tattooing, there's a lot of
Basically,
that.
any opening that allows anything in to the bloodstream.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you think about it. Like you said, everything's going great. Suddenly, just one little tiny detail that you would have never thought it could cause so much trouble.
Yeah.
And you end up in, like, we take life for granted sometimes, and we just go on with our lives, and we do our things. And I did a few videos about having a first aid kit, and yet I went moose hunting and I didn't have mine. And it was, it gets dark around 7:30, so it was around 7:15. My dad calls me. He's like, "Hey, we got one. Come on over. Come help us." Figured, there's only 15 minutes left for our hunt anyway, so we're not going to lose anything. By the time we get there, we still have a chance to see one, or, we go there. And as soon as we got there, my dad's like, "Okay, I'm going to go back to the camp, get the trailer, get the stuff. You go and start like gutting the moose." I'm like, okay. By the time I got to the moose and we were able to find it, I needed my phone to have some light. So my mom was handling the two phones. I have one hand in the moose trying to keep the moose open, because obviously you have to go in and cut a little bit. And suddenly I went with a knife and I just like, oh, that didn't feel right. Took my hand out, and I mean, you already have blood on your hands because you're, dealing with a dead animal. But I could see the blood coming out of my finger like crazy. I'm like, okay, something's wrong. I looked at my mom and said, "Do you have any plasters or anything at all in the Jeep?" She's like, well, I don't think so. So I don't know if you can see. I put a little mark with my pen just to show you how it was cut. That's the scar is still there, so that's why I know.
I was about to say you need to get some antibiotics on
I
that,
was
buddy.
going to say, yeah, that's a little purple, dude. You need to get that looked at.
Yeah.
No,
I thought you were going. I thought you were going to ask your mom if she caught everything on camera. To be honest.
Yeah.
no. But you know, you're in the middle of the
hold
woods. What?
Mom, can you hold me?
Mom, please, mom. Yeah, I was trying to say, mom.
Howie.
You're in the middle of the
That's
woods.
a big thing that people overlook is, especially hunting. When you're out there, you're cold, you're tired, sometimes you're miserable.
You're slipping. Yeah.
You want to kind of get done dressing the animal that you've harvested. Things can slip. Things can, you get you want to get it rushed, and that's a prime opportunity for things to go wrong.
Yeah, and all we had was an old sweatshirt in the back of the Jeep that I had to wrap around my finger and hold it there because we didn't have any tape. So I had to hold it there until we got back to the camp. But the moose was still in the ground, and my brother's never put his hand in there. My mom was not going to put her hand in there. And my dad back then he was 62 years old with knees issues and back pain. So he was the one having to go in there, and I don't understand because he's been hunting his whole life. He didn't know how to properly dress a moose. So I had, with one hand, try to hold the moose as much as I could for him to go in the moose and cut wherever I would show him to cut. So I had to teach him while I was doing it. And it's only the next morning when I woke up and I looked at my finger, and it was like not dark, not black, but I mean, it was like dark color. Like it was,
Well, yeah.
It was hurting as hell. Like it, and there's nothing I could have done after that. Like I had to endure the pain because I'm not going to take Advils. I'm not going to take Tylenol for a small cut like that. And I'm not getting out of the woods to go to the hospital. Like I had a few plasters and a few bandage, and it was like, okay, let's go.
For the American audience, a plaster is a Band-Aid, correct? A type of Band-Aid?
Yeah.
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
The tiny ones.
It's a brand.
The ones you give
the
to the kids.
butterfly stitch?
No, they're not stitches. They're just
your regular bandage.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's funny because it's the smallest thing sometimes that can go wrong pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like small cuts, micro cuts, all that can have Hep C on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bloodborne pathogen stuff. It's important to be careful with that, and just cleaning your hands. Just be clean. You're always dirty on a homestead. Me doing the chickens, fixing things, gardening. It's always messy.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, harvesting the chickens is one of those ones where we're always so careful.
Mike, with the chicken, Mike actually he went in and he had the chicken's neck and he cut, and then he realized he may need to cut a little deeper, and so he went in quick so there was no suffering and killed the bird, but also took right down to the bone.
Oh,
and he still has a really deep scar. But Mike should be on here too. But you were talking about
always welcome,
right? Well, he's doing his own thing right now. But Darren was talking about injections in his shoulder, and I was gonna just with Mike's shoulder surgery. They told him it'd be 4 to 6 weeks recovery, and he come out of the surgery and they're like, no. It's a lot worse than we thought. You're looking at 6 to 9 months.
Oh.
And he, at that time, was the only one working. And so that took us for a loop, like healing wise, financially, like spiritually, like his mental health, everything, because he was the one-armed bandit he had to wear a sling for quite a while. And we were completely off grid at that time, but we weren't good off grid. So we didn't have the proper battery setups. The chimney, of course, needed to be cleaned, and so we had to call help. And Mike has a hard time with that too. So, but yeah, he got the injections and everything, and they ended up having to like shave his bone, cut tendons, reattach them, and they removed his bursa sac too. And so it was a pretty major surgery, and it took us
They
for
removed his what?
the bursa is in here.
Okay.
The bursa sac.
Okay. Oh, okay. So it's in the shoulder. It's not like.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a fluid filled sac that helps lubricate the shoulder, or like when you can
Yeah.
probably when you have a lot of pain in here, you can probably feel it.
Yeah.
It can regrow, but he's already had one surgery, and he actually did it in the military as well. It was something to do with him during training in a backpack.
Okay.
He's got 10% cartilage left in the left shoulder. So,
Oh,
Yeah.
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 So that's,
Yeah.
it's fun. Oh,
Tracy, how about you? Any injuries?
Most of my injuries on my current homestead have been in the kitchen. Yeah, my fingers get shredded, my knuckles get shredded. When I'm well, you could, I don't know if you can see it. There's like all over, and the tips of my fingers, and they bleed. I have basically Band-Aids or plasters, as Remy called them. They don't live long at my house. They get used.
Yeah.
The worst homestead incident that I had, or that I remember, wasn't me. It was Trevor. Wendy and I we were in Port Leyden, excuse me, and we were in the garden, and we were working in the garden. Trevor pulls up in his truck, and he gets out, and he walks over. He says, "Hey, feel like riding to Lowville with me?" And I looked at Wendy, and I couldn't leave her, and I'm like, "Gee," I said, "kind of in the middle of something, brother. I'd, would." And so then he reached down and he opened his, now that I see it, cut pant leg, and shows me this gash that is literally split. It kind of looked like Darren's son's leg that got hit with the ice skate.
It was nasty.
Except there was more blood. And he says, "No, really, do you want to go to Lowville with me?" Because that's where the hospital is. And I said, yeah. And Wendy didn't understand what was going on. I had to explain to her when I got home. She liked Wendy liked her frying pans. And so I'm like, baby, I didn't go out to eat. I took him to the hospital. He cut his leg. What he was doing was he was going to drop a tree on his land. He lives across the street from my mom. He owns both properties, and he was going to drop a tree, and he was cutting the brush around the base of the tree, and the saw kicked back, and he didn't have a good hold of it. And when a saw bites, it bites.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've hurt myself a bunch on the homes, just little things for the most part. And you really want to make sure they get clean. Learn self-aid.
Yes.
My mom is always so worried. She's like, "You're up there all alone. What if you roll the tractor over on yourself?" I'm like, "Well, Mama, pray it kills me so I don't suffer."
Legit questions.
The biggest thing I'd say is like, I said it in my last video. I'm kind of a gear whore. I love gear and that sort of thing. When it comes to medical supplies, get training.
Yeah,
absolutely, get training. Go out for stop the bleed courses, any other courses you can take. One reference I would make is ctoms.ca. awesome guys. They wrote the book on TCCC for Medicare in Canadian Forces because, the thing is, we all like our gear, our products, our everything that we have, but medical stuff is one of those things that you do not want to mess around with. It's okay to, get used to the tractor or get used to your pew-pews, that sort of thing. But medical gear, when it comes down to it, when it happens, you want to be sure you're doing the right thing. If you're not, you might lose a life rather than save a life.
Yeah.
I got a small kit everywhere, like just a small kit, like mainly for small stuff because even if you're geared up for big stuff, you can apply that to yourself. Like a broken leg. Like, okay, I got stuff for my broken leg, but you can't do nothing. So in that case, I'd rather be prepared otherwise, as per foam, CB, stuff like that, to communicate that I'm not sick, but broken or something.
Yeah.
Always tell people if you're alone, you tell people where you're going, and stuff like that.
And like Darren touched on it earlier a little bit. Know what effects your body is going to go through with certain injuries. He recognized, okay, I'm starting to go into a little shock. It's not really loss of blood, I don't think, but
no,
it's
exactly.
It's
mental versus actual
your body will do that so that you don't feel the pain immediately, and that gives you a brief window to work on yourself. Setting your own leg, I don't know, you've got to be a man's man or a woman's woman to even think about doing stuff like
Well,
that.
the adrenaline will kick in, and then, like you said, your thoughts are going to go crazy, and you're like lost in all of that at some point, and you have to just take a deep breath and think about what can happen if you do this and if you do that. You decided to stay home to take care of your cow. You didn't want to lose your meat, but you knew that you were safe until it was over. But you have to keep in mind, sometimes you might have to analyze everything and say, okay, well, the cow it has to wait. I have to think about my life first. It gets to the point you have to go and deal with the rest later.
Or the hell with the cow and I'm dying.
First aid. You take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
Am I okay? All right, now I can move on.
Yeah.
And what sometimes I get the first two confused. It's check for bleeding or stop the bleeding, check for breathing, and treat for shock.
Yeah.
The first two, because why stop the bleeding if he's not breathing? But you can bleed out while somebody can bleed out while you're doing CPR. You could be pushing the blood right out.
For something like that, I would say, if you're at that point, like if you're worried about that situation, you really need to take one of the CTOM's course.
Mm-hmm.
And they will walk you through those different situations on, if you have a major bleed where artery is spurting and now you have lost, well, it wouldn't be you, because if you lose consciousness,
you're dead.
Bye-bye. But if you're with someone who has a major bleed and they lose consciousness, or lose a pulse, what do you do at that point? That's where I'm saying that medical training is priceless.
Yeah. When I hurt my hand, I went through a little bit of something, but I saw it's important too, because Mike went through some panic, and I had to end up, because I'm good with medical stuff. It doesn't bother me, but he can be, but he went into a bit of shock, I think. Mm-hmm. And he was like, okay, where's this? Where's that? And I had to guide him because he just wanted to take care of me, and he didn't know how to kind of zone and hone in on himself. So to take care of me, I guess. He did ultimately, but once I realized I was safe and I was en route to hospital, even though like at this time I didn't know anything, but all I could think of, and looking back, it's things that are normal to think of, but I couldn't stop laughing and I couldn't stop thinking to myself because I was just about to start work. It was a week away from me starting about a week and a half away from me starting a new job. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? I can't move my hand. I thought for sure I broke it and crushed all in here. And that's all like laughing. And what about my job? Laughing. And it's not rational. It's rational to have those thoughts, but to repeat them over and over.
Right.
And then I
Mental.
get, pardon?
No, I was going to say mental health is so important.
Yeah.
You know, and being strong in there as well as physical is so important, because if it's you, if it's someone else, doesn't matter. You know, like it's. I remember my son was 6 months and he got burned here by water, boiling water. I took one of the phone book, and I moved maybe 6 months ago. Took the wrong phone book from the wrong province to call the 811 hospital and stuff, you know. And so, but the thing you have to remember is all that lasts maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, that whole process of, am I doing this? Am I doing that? It might be 5 seconds, you know.
Yeah.
So you have to be, and sometimes you don't know you are able to, but you got this no matter what, usually, mostly.
And that's the thing is, the more knowledge you have about different situations that occur, the calmer you will be in those situations. So, for example, like you said, the boiling water, I had that happen when I was young. I was a kid, and my dad was making his coffee or tea, probably his coffee, the way he drinks coffee, pouring kettle. And I turned around and bumped him.
Sorry.
And again, same situation. It poured all down my shoulder, the boiling water from the kettle. And immediately my mom grabbed me and stuck me under the cold water of the tap. Cold running water is not ideal. You'd rather have ice in that. But it was the first thing she did. Bam. And it was like instant. And that probably helped quite a bit. And it's those situations where if the person has that knowledge of what's happening in that specific situation to be able to deal with it. So whether it is a cut, a broken bone, a burn, hypothermia, anything like that, the more knowledge you have, the calmer you will be dealing with that situation.
Well, fear stems from lack of knowledge.
Yes.
People are afraid of pew-pews because they don't understand pew-pews.
Correct.
People are afraid of animals because, you know, it's like the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin.
I have a phobia of sharks. Does that count?
Yeah. Yeah. You just
don't
understand
shark, Darren.
I do understand them. They're dangerous. They have big teeth and stuff.
Like, go talk to them. You'll see they're not that bad.
I've held a shark, Darren, like a full-grown shark. Wow. I was in the water, and I have a picture of me holding a shark.
No.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great white shark.
No, it was a hammerhead, but
those are cool.
But hammerheads are pretty. They're like one of the top ones that are cranky.
Oh,
but
they were the ones not.
They eat shrimps. Don't worry.
But exactly that lack of knowledge is what creates the panic, creates the fear, creates the situation where bad things can escalate.
Yeah. So another injury I had was a burn. It was really, really bad. And I decided to go live. I was getting ready to go live after.
That's medication.
Dedication,
And
yes.
so
Yeah.
I was cold. I just come out of the shower and I was
The
sitting
show
there.
must go on.
That's it. And the live is still on my channel. But I was getting dressed. I was in front of the fireplace because I was chilly, and my dog just walked by me and literally knocked me over. And my hand, first it went down on the
Oh,
fireplace,
stove.
and it was like over 400 degrees. And then I still didn't have my balance. It was all split second. So I put my hand down on the fireplace, picked it up quickly. I still didn't have my balance and put it back on the chimney. So the initial burn was here and it was really bad. And then all down here was from the chimney. I knew what to do with mine. They actually say no ice anymore. They say cold water. It doesn't have to be running, but even put it in a cup if you're able to. And the reason I knew that, for me, I didn't panic. But for my grandson, he accidentally touched the fireplace too.
Yeah.
And I panicked. And I'm good with medical situations, but with him, I panicked and I didn't
That's
know
your
what
baby.
to do. And so I asked my doctor, what is the best course for a burn? I mean, I know cold, but to keep it in cold water for 10 minutes minimum. After that, if you have a second or third degree burn, no amount of cold water, it's already in the deep tissue and you need medical help for that.
Yeah.
But cold water for sure. But I went through a whole, like, Mike made me drink that night because I couldn't stop panicking. And I was like, my baby.
Yeah.
And he was like passed out sleeping. And all I could think of was him waking up the next morning with his hand, like, melting off or something. But for hours, he made me drink until I was like, okay, but you got to wake up every like 2 hours and make sure he's okay. And after that, I touched up on my burn care. And then I got burned.
And it's funny, waking up 2 hours isn't a big deal unless you're like have a concussion, head injury, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or hypothermia situations. There are certain situations you
I
don't
went through
want
that. That's not fun.
Yeah. I have a friend who had a barbecue incident and with his hand, and his hand basically melted.
Oh,
Not fully, but everything was loose. He was saying, and I was like, just when you turn it on, it's it goes like not a bomb, but it goes.
Yep.
That's what happened. His hand wasn't there when he tried to light it up, and
Wow.
so
And we're talking about that, and I have another fun story. We still have time. Guy I know, pretty awesome guy. He was in the army back then. I think that little accident ended up his soldier career. He was snowmobiling, and at some point he missed a curve, and he ended up falling off the skidoo. And all I remember, he was telling me the story about how he remembers getting up, removing his helmet, removing his gloves. For some reason, he says he doesn't understand what he was thinking back then. He removed his gloves, he removed his helmet, and then he passed out. The adrenaline must have hit him, or whatever happened. And I mean, obviously, people start worrying that he should have been home, and he wasn't home. So people went looking for him. But he woke up, and his hands were frozen. And as right now, I mean, it's been, I'm guessing, around 20 years now. They had to, well, the fingers fell off. He lost, I think it's pretty much all his fingers. They had to take some of his toes to put on his hands. So now he comes to the ball games, and obviously, I mean, he can't be at the same level as we are, but because he only has, tiny little fingers. But it shows that even if you think that like Darren, you were talking about being prepared, and it's good. It obviously is good because I'd rather be with someone that's prepared than someone that's not.
Yeah.
But in that situation, you don't have control over your mind. If something really bad happens, and I don't know, I guess you have to think about what happens if I do this and that. But you never know, like the unpredictable might happen. And if you're not ready, your brain's just going to go crazy and you won't be doing the right thing. Like he doesn't know why you removed his gloves, but then he passed out. So he was awake, took his gloves off, took his helmet off, and then he passed out.
Probably
So he
remove
lost his fingers.
the glove to remove his helmet.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things too with different situations where the more you know, the more you're conscious, the more you've experienced some situations, the better you are dealing with it. For example, falling in cold water. The biggest situation with that is, you fall through the ice. Most people instantly start to panic, instantly start to,
Yeah.
well, all of a sudden now you've just sucked in a whole bunch of cold water and you're basically dead. So, falling in the cold water, you got to make sure, you've maybe not dealt with that before, but you're able to realize that you can't panic. You have to deal with that kind of initial shock, and calm yourself down. Because if you start to hyperventilate, if you start to deep breathe, you're dead.
Faster. Yeah.
You get out, you start working on getting out, getting yourself warm, that sort of thing. Again, your brain, as soon as these situations happen, your brain instantly starts to go into, freaking out.
Yeah.
So the more you can calm your brain down in every single one of these medical situations, the better you are prepared to deal with what's going on, what's going to happen next, what you need to do.
And one of the tricks that I learned, I can't remember how, I don't know where I learned it, but it works even for panic attacks. It may not work every time, but one of the reasons we panic is because we don't know something. So, for example, you don't know what to do. If all you think about is bring your brain to a spot where you do know something. So even if it's something as simple as your phone number, that's why, they ask some of those questions like to you in a medical situation or an emergency situation, because when you start to talk about the things, like my name is Angie, I was born on this day. Yes, they use it to assess head injuries, but they also use it for your panic, because when you talk about things, your brain thinks it's not in such a state of worry. And so it does work. Even if you're alone and you don't lose consciousness, you can say things like, okay, I'm safe. My neighbor's right there if I need them. Bridget may be 45 minutes away, but my neighbor in an emergency is right there. And so calming your brain into things that is a trick that I did learn, and I've used it a couple of times, except not the night when my grandbaby burned his hand.
Yeah, pulling those things that are familiar.
There's stuff that hits you more than others, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, Angie, if you dealt with. Go ahead, Rem. Do you want to?
Well, I was going to say it's pretty much time to go to round number 2. If we all head out to Patreon, we can go and start talking about protecting your homestead. I think that's a good way to stop now. We've learned about
picture.
You'll see my injury picture.
My face? Yeah, so we've talked a lot about injuries, how to react, how to change your mind. Same thing can be applied to if someone comes in your property or in your house, or if a critter comes in to try to steal your food or anything like that. So if you want to learn about that, follow us on Patreon. We're going to be there in a few minutes. And we just close by saying who we are, where we can find our information. Darren, last time we all said our on social media where people can find us. So maybe you want to go ahead and start.
Yeah, definitely on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. If you want to check out Thor Haven Farm, we should come up first. You can check us out there.
And obviously YouTube.
He said that.
I hope I said that.
Yeah, you did. YouTube. Me and You Acres on YouTube. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and older stuff is on TikTok.
Okay.
I'm Patrick Cuss. You can find me on social media at my name. And that's about that.
Tracy Tham141 Homestead, Tham141homestead.com, and Instagram, and Tracy Hand on Facebook.
Well, obviously, you'll find me on YouTube under Ram's Family Farm. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram a little bit, and I used to do a little bit of TikTok, but not there as much. So, yeah, check it out. A bunch of nice people here tonight and every night, obviously.
Absolutely.